Welcome, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
As people come into the room, please feel free to take a look at the emotion wheel and share how you're feeling tonight in the chat. And also, we'd love to share your pronouns, your name, how you're feeling, where you're from, any of that good stuff to build community fast. So welcome to part 5 of the Put on Your Own Oxygen Mask First webinar series on social emotional learning. And tonight's topic is social awareness. Oh, I think there's one. Let me check. All right, if you want to go ahead and move it to the next slide. Welcome everyone to part 5 of the CEL webinar series. Tonight's focus is social awareness. So to kick us off, we'd love to know how you're feeling. If you can read an emotion there on the emotion wheel and share it in the chat, as well as where you're from, what your pronouns are, please do. And then Ellen, if you want to move us to the next slide. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to one of our executive committee members, Mark Jewell from North Carolina with a beautiful accent. We were just talking about it. He has been in education for over 30 years, and most of that has been in 4th and 5th grade. He is an advocate for children, for public ed policy. He was in the streets in 2018 with Red for Ed, and is active locally in his state and obviously nationally. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for those wonderful, that wonderful introduction. It's and that picture of me up there. Wow. I wish I still looked that youthful. It was about 15 years ago, I think, but I'll take it. Let's just leave it up there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I am Mark Joel. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a 5th grade educator from Greensboro, North Carolina. And we begin by acknowledging that we are meeting virtually. I'm coming to you from North Carolina, and today I would like to lift up the traditional land served by the Lumbee people. The 55,000 members of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina reside predominantly in Robeson, Hoke, Cumberland, and Scotland counties. The Lumbee tribe is the largest tribe in North Carolina and the largest tribe east of the Mississippi River, and the 9th largest in the nation. The Lumbee take their name from the Lumbee River, which winds its way through Robeson County. Pembroke, in North Carolina, is the economic, cultural, and political center of the tribe. The Lumbee people have been recognized by the state of North Carolina since 1885, and at the same time established a separate school system that would benefit tribal members. In 1887, the state established the Croatan Normal Indian School, which is today the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. In 1956, a bill was passed by the United States Congress, which recognized the Lumbee as Indian, but denied the tribe full status as a federally recognized Indian tribe. Federal recognition for the tribe is currently being sought through federal legislation. We honor America's first people and all elders, past, present, and emerging, and we are called on to learn and share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the American story. And thank you by letting me, I have the honor to kick off that with, as we do with all of our meetings, with our land acknowledgement. Now, as we begin to start off this evening, this is the part of our national series for the school year. All of the webinars this year use the NEA leadership competencies and social emotional intelligence competencies as the frame for our sessions. This webinar is one way the NEA is trying to support members in our professional work. Our members are our experts, and all of our NEA national webinars are led by experienced members and staff, just like we have on our call this evening. You're going to have a short evaluation form to fill out at the end that identifies other topics that you might be interested in hearing from. And it is my honor to introduce two of our amazing facilitators tonight. We got Reese Colbert, who is a district equity coach with Cedar Rapids Education Association in the great state of Iowa, and Ellen Brooks, who's a school improvement coach from Monroe Public Schools in beautiful Michigan with the Michigan Education Association. So let's turn it over to both Reese and Ellen.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for that introduction.
Like trying to find my mute button. We were talking about how like unzoomed we are lately. Oh my gosh.
Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here, and we're so glad you're using the chat structure. We have designed an interactive piece for you tonight, so please keep your keyboards handy. We're going to jump right in. We've found out what emotions you're feeling, but now we want to kind of zero in to kind of get us primed and ready for our content for tonight. So as you notice, we have some prompts here on the screen, and we'd love for you to share or select one of those prompts. And then in the meantime, you've been telling us where you're from, which is awesome, but we'd love to know what you do. And then if you'd be willing to share an element of gratitude as well. We're just gonna give you a moment, get your thinking caps on. Just curious how we're meeting you and greeting you tonight.
I'm trying to think of my third blue thing, Reese. At 2 came to mind so quickly. I'm pulling from my gratitude. So my 3 blue things that I'm feeling grateful for are blueberries, because I did not know that I liked them until I was an adult. My mom didn't like blueberries, so she didn't buy them, right? So like I only recently found a love of blueberries. We picked out some beautiful blue paint for our bedroom walls that I'm very excited about. And my Nintendo Switch, my dad got me new controllers for Christmas, and they're bright blue and they work great because my old ones weren't working so well. So I get some downtime with silly video games and they bring me joy. I know Jennifer's teasing me. I know. I never really had blueberries. What are you feeling grateful for, Arise?
Just put mine in the chat, but I'm tackling that first one about thinking about my senses. I'm extremely excited about seeing my seedlings grow. I am a huge container gardener, so that's real exciting to see that happening. I was also sharing that for my birthday, I received a beautiful candle, so I'm smelling it right now. It's kind of helping set the tone. And was just thinking about how excited I was about a compliment I just received from our brand new superintendent. So just kind of thinking these things all happened within the last 24 hours. So I was thinking about those things that I'm extremely grateful for.
Oh, I love that. I saw a flare pen in the chat somewhere. My husband teases me. He calls them markers. I'm like, you just don't understand. You don't understand the power of of the flare pen. Wonderful. So, Arise mentioned we wanted to start with this for a very good reason. As we were delving into this topic of social awareness, I discovered something, and on every list was gratitude. And when I think about social awareness, I don't think gratitude came to mind first for me. So when you consider social awareness as, thinking outside yourself, gratitude is the process of thinking outside of yourself with appreciation. So having that appreciation for others, for things in the world, that is a very grounding element of social awareness, which was very surprising to me. So we found this great image for you. It catalog some of the excellent benefits of expressing gratitude. I know that in recent history, gratitude and journaling and all these great opportunities to foster gratitude have kind of been increasing, and at least in my experience as an educator. So positivepsychology.com is listed in the chat for you and on this slide. When you go to this particular article, there's tons and tons for all of these beautiful roles that I'm seeing. There are wonderful, wonderful examples, popular exercises for all ages and demographics. So we really appreciate giving you the opportunity to take a moment for gratitude, and then perhaps to find something in addition that could be helpful and wholesome for you, personally or professionally.
Which brings us into our agenda for tonight. As you can tell, we wanted to get us in that mind frame of social awareness by starting with a piece. So let's dig further. What do we mean by social awareness is the first part of our agenda.
I'm struggling with my chat. Another thing that we really want to do is provide tools and competencies to build our personal social awareness. And then
and at the same time, we wanted to think about, once we built those items for ourselves, how do we also share tools and competencies for others that we work with?
And of course, there's way too many things to talk about in 1 hour. So we have tons of extra things that you might enjoy on further slides that we won't get to today. So we're going to talk about a couple of models that you may be familiar with, like the Castle model. They have a great assessment tool that we've talked about in previous sessions on these SEL competencies. We're going to explore social awareness as a part of those competencies, and then we're really a goal that we have, a gratitude we'd like to explore, is the ability to have some practical skills to support yourself, students, colleagues in this healing journey that we're all kind of on together and desperate for in the education community.
And so keeping that in mind, then, this visual here is to kind of, again, walk us where we've been and where we're heading. As mentioned, this is number 5. And so we've had some previous competencies shared, and we zero in on the one that we're focusing on tonight. And notice we have a star by empathy. It's one of the pieces we want to take some time tonight to identify and dig a little deeper with. And then finally, our bottom section just wants to remind you that that's coming up, the relationship management. So all of these things, again, are part of the process and the progress that we are doing here with NEA. And speaking of NEA, you'll notice we have 2 images on here, and we're going to talk about how these things come together. Mark already illustrated earlier that the social emotional learning is one of the leadership competencies for the NEA leadership framework. And so it's strategically placed in the middle, as we know that as we build our competencies in the other areas, having a strong focus here helps develop our skill set with the other competencies as leaders.
And the other model we mentioned, the Castle model, we really value having those frameworks to help us in this important work that we're doing. So we're going to introduce and talk about those social awareness pieces of the social and emotional learning that comes from everywhere, right at the very center of our classroom, schools, families, communities. So this is a huge piece of the SEL puzzle.
So on this slide here, we have zeroed in on our competency framework and pulled one section of the social awareness piece. So we kind of take you through this journey tonight, and we're really wanting to take a look at thinking about our constructive choices, our personal behavior, and our social interactions. And so I'm taking a look at the structure here. We're thinking about, our progressions, our behaviors, and then what are those additional things to help us get better, be our authentic selves, and really become the leaders, the educators we truly want to be. So again, this is just a piece of the competency that we wanted to focus and structure a lot of our learning around tonight.
And the Castle model is a great touchstone because they give you these slices that you can dig into. So the idea that social awareness comes from all of these different bullet points, right? This idea that to understand perspectives and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, culture, and contexts, you really have to not only take on other perspectives, but show concern and recognize opportunities to grow. And it's a very complex process, and it's a very intrinsically human process, I think. So the castle model is really lovely, and I know the link is in the chat if you haven't spent much time with it. It's a really great place to get grounded, and there's lots of good resources that we'll get to. And actually, the first thing we wanted to do with you today was to look at a piece of that self-reflection assessment. So we would encourage you to use the chat, use a paper and pencil, a Flair pen and some paper, or just in your own mind. We wanted to pull out a piece of that self-reflection from Castle. That self-assessment is a really grounding activity. It's easy to do for yourself. It's easy to do with others. So we are just going to walk you through this, and I know we don't normally read slides to you, but I'm going to be bad and do that for a moment. But we just want you to think about, when you hear this, is this something that is rare for you, sometimes for you, or often for you? And how you feel about those can help guide you in some of this growing work that we're doing. So the very first one is empathy. And the social awareness skill of empathy, they ask you to consider, I listen actively and can grasp another person's perspective and feelings from both verbal and nonverbal cues. Give you a minute. Feel free to jot down a rarely, a sometimes, and often. Hold it in your head, throw it in the chat, whatever makes you happy. The next element is respect for others. I believe that in general, people are doing their best, and I expect the best of them. The next is appreciation of diversity. I appreciate and get along with people of diverse backgrounds and cultures in my school community, and utilize inclusionary practices to ensure all voices are represented. I know this is really difficult for me in my district. It's a primarily Caucasian, middle, lower class pool of educators and students. So I know that this is a challenge for me personally. This would be something that I know I'm striving for, but I know is a challenge for me and my demographic. In organizational awareness, I am astute in organizational situations and am able to identify crucial social networks. And I understand the organizational forces at work, guiding values, and unspoken rules that operate among people. And if that makes you a little worried or uncomfortable, we have strategies for you to deal with conversations that can feel difficult, tense. We have some great resources for you today. So as we were going through these elements, we're hoping that you had the opportunity to think about, are you in that rarely? Are you kind of all over the board? How you're feeling says a lot about where you are and where you're going as a person, as a professional, in a lot of different ways. So Aris is going to let you know what happens if you are getting a lot of oftens.
All right. And again, as already alluded, this is again a self-reflection. So we want to remind ourselves this is not about judgment of, it's just a chance to reflect upon. And so when you look at our often category, again, we're looking at places where this is maybe a good start for myself, or something that I'm very comfortable with, but how can I make that, so automatic in my practice or my thinking or my behavior that it's, again, automatic. And so we just want to think about that. So often is a good place. Rarely is a good place, because sometimes some of these things should be rare, or some places, again, where we want growth. And then sometimes, of course, too. So just want to talk about often for a second. It's probably, again, good thing, but I want to be more automatic with my behaviors, responses, and my thinking.
And that rarely column too is a place where we can bend ourselves to work, right? So what do our challenges, where do they relate to this sort of rubric? And how, rubric isn't even the right word. It's almost like it's a self-reflection is what it is. It's not really a rubric at all. It's not a score, it's a reflection. So, how can we look at an area and use that to help benefit us in our interactions? So this self-assessment, these examples, they all come with that self-assessment. If it's useful for you in whatever context and you take a look at it, it walks you through, right? This is what it means when we think about each of these. And there's one of these for every SEL competency that we've talked about and we'll talk about. And because, Aris, we don't have all the time in the world, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to zero in on today.
Exactly, because we know that the goal of the webinar is to provide exposure, that foundationary level. And so with that in mind, in the time frame in which we must work in, we're highlighting the two that you see on the screen here. We wanted to dive a little into empathy and compassion, do a little definition, do some more clarity around those pieces. And then we also want to acknowledge and identify diversity and social norms, and again, sometimes the unseen or unspoken. So that's where we're heading to next. And so in order to do that, we want to have a collective understanding of what is social awareness. So two things, we have 2 slides on this. So, and as Ellen already indicated, we're not going to read these to you, but I guess we want to kind of, again, do an overview or a highlight of where we're heading. And so just identifying those first words for each bullet, or first terms, I should say, for each bullet is all I'm going to highlight here, because once again, be sure to grab a copy of the slides or follow along and revisit this as you have time to do so. So we're looking closely at what we mean by emotional self-awareness. We talk about self-regulation all the time for children, but what does that look like for us as adults? Another place to think about. Motivation, empathy, we're going to spend a little bit more time on. Respect, word we use often, but again, we got to think about the cultural lens that comes into play often with that term. Kindness, listening, and cooperation. There's a lot. So our goal tonight is to pick some things that we felt we could engage in the time that we're allotted.
The first thing we're going to jump into with Fidelity is empathy. I think that personally, as an educator, most recently a classroom educator, now a school improvement coach, the conversations I'm having with our restorative practice coaches, with teachers, with students, it all centers around this need for more empathy with one another. So this is something I've been spending a lot of attention and time on. So if you have expertise in this, please feel free to share in the chat. I am by no means an expert. I'm someone who's an enthusiast in empathy at the moment. So we've included a helpful graphic to remind that empathy doesn't just come in the form of words, it's actions as well. The ability to ask those open-ended questions, be mindful, and especially something I've been working on personally is that the body language. So withholding judgment, and giving that understanding. So the first thing I want to do before we dive into our empathy conversation is spot the difference activity. So put on your kid hat, back in the day of the Highlight magazine. We have an image here for how to be sympathetic and how to be empathetic. And if you could, in the chat, highlight a difference that you see, something that differentiates the two, and noticing or an understanding you might have and how these two images are different, we would appreciate that. Forcing you to get involved. I know some of you are working. I'm on spring break, so I'm full of just verve and energy. I've done nothing all day, hang out with a toddler. So does anyone see a difference between the two? Ooh, very cool. Having empathy offers the other person a solution to a problem. Words versus help. That's very, yes, one is sewing. I really liked these images, and they're from Grammarly, which is not where I expected to find them. But when I was looking for images of empathy, this one really stood out to me. Oh, one is kindness and thoughtfulness. This image is pretty powerful, and it stems from the active component. Excellent, Kim. Wow, active component of empathy. I think that there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy, and I think that sympathy is happening in my school and in my experience, but the empathy element is lacking. That actual action of how can I help and feel. So when we look at different, oh my screen just went very strange. oh, because I opened the link that I embedded for you, because why wouldn't I do that? Just so you know, most images and links are actually linked and will take you where you want to go. So sorry about that. I'm going to do it again. I just clicked on the image. It's going to go back to the website. Just a second. We're trying. We can do this. We have not been off Zoom that long, have we, Aries?
We have
Everything's
not,
gonna
but
be
the
fine.
excitement builds.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and reshare my screen because we're being temperamental, which is rude. And Aris, you might need to share if I'm
Okay.
experiencing some difficulty. There we go. I think I'm back.
Okay. So otherwise, I was ready.
I've been doing these sessions for years now, and I'm still surprised by the things that go on. I apologize, everyone. Here we go. Back to business. Probably should have went to the next slide so I didn't do the same mistake
Well,
again.
that's okay. And while you're bringing it up, I will just start to set the scene for the next
Thank
slide. How
you.
about
Please
that?
do.
So after looking at the image, our next slide actually gets us into the types of empathy. We know that empathy is something that we learn. It is something that we develop, and the more practice, like anything else that we want to get better at, this is what this provides. So as you look at our slide here, we talk about and provide more context around what is cognitive, compassionate, or emotional empathy. We have skill sets in all three. It's how do we know which one is appropriate in the setting that we need, and how do we again develop more skills and really get good at it, and it becomes so natural, again, like we talked about from before, that ability to develop our skills, get better at it, make it so automatic that we don't have to think about, oh, which one is the right one for this setting. And so when again, you are coming back to the slide deck and you're going to dig a little deeper, we really hope that this particular slide provides you context about the different ways in which empathy can be displayed.
And I think the biggest sort of explosive moment of understanding for me is the idea that just putting yourself in someone else's shoes is one of the lowest forms of empathy. It's just that cognitive piece. And it's when we're able to combine that with true compassion that we can get to that true sort of emotional empathy where we can truly understand someone else and respond in a way where we can make that difference, which is really powerful for me. I think that even in conversations that I'm having with kids and adults too, that has made a really big change for me, that it's more than just, oh, I can see where you're coming from. It's more than just, oh no, I'm sorry your doll got broken. It's like, you know, internalizing that experience without being overwhelmed by it. So we're going to do another sort of, you know, together adventure.
And we also want to say, in the example that we're using, we hope it's not triggering for anyone. I think about those of us who support students who may find themselves in the situation. We're hoping it's a great example of to help us identify the differences. So tiny text here, so I'm going to read it aloud, but this is an interactive piece, so be ready with your keyboard to jump in. But what we're asking here, or the scenario we want to set, is a new child comes to school from a foreign country. Their English is not very good yet, and they have a strong accent. When the teacher introduces them to the students and they say, hello, my name is, a few of the other children laugh quietly. So keeping in mind the image Ellen walked us through and we did some practice with, what's the sympathetic response? What's an empathetic response?
And we know that empathy can take different forms. So that cognitive piece is taking the perspective of the person going through that. The emotional piece is that that shift where we kind of want to take action. And that true, like, compassionate, emotional response is like fully understanding. Okay. If you have a thought, if you react to this in a way that makes it, you've had a real like moment of clarity between what that sympathetic response and that emotional response, or that empathetic response would be. Good for you. This is hard for me to think about, but these are the kinds of situations that we may come into. So, if this topic of empathy is important to you as it's become important to me, we have another article from Positive Psychology. I know it says empathy worksheets, but it's not really just worksheets. When you open this article, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Those strategies to develop empathy are on there, all kinds of different activities and exercises. There are some worksheets. I just don't think it's all worksheets, but there are lots of different entry points for you in whatever context you might be in. I know we have middle school teachers, elementary, retired teachers. We run the gamut in this today. So I would encourage you, while you're thinking about empathy, to think not just about the student that may be in that position of being the new student who speaks primarily another language, but also have empathy for those students that may not know how to deal with the fact that they're meeting someone that's different than them. So empathy isn't a one-way street. We have to have empathy for all parties involved, which is kind of hard for me personally. And actually reading this article was helpful to me. So there are some really great things in the chat about ways that we can prompt and be excited for students in that situation in positive ways instead of creating a negative environment, which is really gorgeous. So please look at the chat for some of those wonderful, wonderful ideas and thoughts. Thank you. My goodness. Okay, so this is one of my books that I've been reading that's been very helpful to me. If you're familiar with this book, you can say so in the chat. I know that this author has been very popular of late, and I had the pleasure of attending a session that she ran recently. But in the chat, if you don't mind, I would like for you to rank what is most important to you. So it could be 2, 3, 1, it could be 3, 1, 2, it could be 1, 2, 3, whatever you think. I would love for you to either on your own with your Flair pen at home, in your mind, or in the chat, rank what is most important to you. So number 1 is achieving at a high level. Number 2 is happiness, feeling good most of the time. And number 3 is caring for others. You're allowed to love people, but also be happy for yourself. You don't need to apologize. This is not in any way a condemnation. And you can see in the chat, there's some people that have a lot in common, which is interesting. I wonder, since we're all like educator people, if we all lean a certain way, eh? I know I'm very competitive, so achieving at a high level is important to me. But here's the interesting thing about this specific data set. Over the course of years, I think it was 10 years, 10,000 middle and high school age students were surveyed, and they chose achievement and happiness over compassion every time. So students, well, mostly, students were surveyed in addition and ranked hard work well above fairness in a separate survey. So a quote from the book that really stuck with me was, "If you are not happy, life is nothing. After that, you want to do well. And after that, expend any excess energy on others." So this idea of empathy and this idea of social awareness is a critical point for us, because we do have to have happiness and self-awareness in order to achieve social awareness. But it's interesting, our priorities as a society, a tech-driven, selfie obsessed society at that. So let's see. Yes. So in the book, they ask you to start with yourself. So You have to be prepared to do the work yourself first and often. Keep the focus on the kids, not on you. Consider how you see your kids. I know some of you aren't in the classroom, but this book is designed for people that are in the classroom. And I think we can replace kids with others when we're thinking about this. Be okay with silence and discomfort. Don't save every moment. Decenter your normal. Enter with humility. And remember that progress takes time, effort, and work. So, as we're going, think about these things and what might be a strength for you and an area of challenge. I think that the progress, everything taking time is a challenge for me. I want things to happen quickly. So I know that's a challenge for me, where an area of strength is doing the work myself. I really enjoy doing this kind of work. And we would also like you to consider these chapters in this book. So if you haven't had a chance to see this book or this author, the entire book is built around strategies to teach social comprehension. These chapters are outlined in this book, and we would like you to just take a moment and think about which area might be your area of growth and doing that work yourself first. So there's exploring identities, listening with love, being candid, becoming better informed, finding humanity in ourselves and others, and facing crisis together. So as we move forward, just think about, right, myself, what are my strengths, my challenges, where does my growth need to come from? Because that's how we start to do the work for this social comprehension. Oops.
Okay, so a lot of this work is self-work, as well as work that we can do with and for others. But no matter which side we're on and which area we're working on, the listening actively is so important. And although we're not going to really dive deep in there, because this active listening piece is really also thoroughly embedded in all of the competencies, but probably will show up more intently in the next webinar regarding relationships. So I just wanted to be sure that we highlighted it for a moment and indicated that if you're also looking at the resource Ellen just walked us through, that chapter 2, listening with love, would be another way to again enter that space. So keeping in mind that when we think about listening with this focus, we want to think about real communication and real learning. We've all heard the saying that, you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so we want to encourage that use of listening for understanding and not necessarily listening to respond.
Mm-hmm. And the idea that true communication, true growth comes from active, actual, empathic listening.
So, as we indicated in our agenda, we wanted to make sure that we were providing a tool, something that, again, tonight you can walk away and take back to use, whether you work with adults, whether you work with children, or something that you'd even do with your family. So we want to talk about these skills to help us develop social awareness. So if you're not familiar with this particular text, we have it also in our resource slide. So the title can be a tough to read here, but we really wanted to get into what we mean to develop social awareness. You know, as we already hinted, that listening piece is appropriate, but we want to listen with greater clarity. So we're looking for those different points of views. We wanted to think about criticism as constructive as opposed to destructive, but identifying that diversity piece is a really big part of social awareness, so that we're thinking about differences and similarities within the context of people, events, those kinds of pieces. And we can't do that unless we have a growth mindset. Being ready, open, and willing is so important to become better at this piece. So Ellen and I were going, okay, how can we display this in a visual? Yes, this is something that she and I get really excited about. So we're looking at key language, key terms that really help us do this. And the point of it, and then again, coming from the resource that was shown on the last slide, we got to get to the emotional root. And in order to do that, you may notice some positionality in the words that we're using. We really need to build two things, our knowledge and capacity. And when we do that, it helps us manage discomfort, because discomfort is important. If something doesn't trigger for us, we may not be as aware, keyword there. And what we want to help do is minimize misunderstanding. So we go back to the example we were using earlier. How do we address the students who giggle quietly at the language capacity of the student who just come from another country? You know, being able to get to do the work, we're doing these 4 things, and we want to highlight the knowledge, capacity, and discomfort, because that's a real key part of the process. If these things aren't working in conjunction, that misunderstanding will go further, further, and further apart in a way that it interrupts our ability to be active listening and developing those skills to be socially aware.
So the idea is that when we are working towards social awareness, it's not always easy and it's not always comfortable. Even empathy is not always easy and comfortable. I saw in the comments someone said that their heart was bleeding for that imaginary student who was struggling with a new school and a new language. So another element of the book, being the change that we wanted to kind of highlight, was that sometimes there is discomfort. So there's some great tools in that text that we picked out for you that are to help deal with discomfort. So if you're entering your conversations with intent to learn something, if you're really committed to the possibility of being uncomfortable at some point, if you're able to notice the feeling of that discomfort, like your body is responding. I know that when I am uncomfortable, I get very smiley and laughy, which is totally inappropriate, and it does not help situations. And when I'm very angry, I cry. And that also is not helpful at all in discomfort situations. So I know how my body tends to react. Expecting that someone very well may disagree with any opinion you have, understanding the value in listening to someone else's perspective, and always, before you speak any truth for yourself, think about how another may see that truth that you have. So these are tools that we can use to combat discomfort and prepare ourselves and prepare our peers, our colleagues, our students. A big highlight for this reading that I did in this book to prepare for this webinar was that ability to strive for awareness and understanding rather than consensus and compliance. Not everyone will experience social dynamics in the same way. The absolute imperative to resist defensiveness, acknowledge awkwardness, and look for ways to move forward productively is just tantamount to the ability to engage in these social minefield is a very harsh word. Social soups. You soup. Like it's sort of quagmire-ish. You never quite know. And as much as you can empathize with someone, as much as you can listen and hear them, you're coming from a place of your own understanding. And if we go back up to that beautiful graphic briefly, that ability to increase our capacity and acknowledge misunderstandings is huge, because we can't get away from misunderstanding. It will happen. So being able to prepare ourselves for that is wonderful. And we'd like to give you a moment in the chat to look at this particular sort of discomfort lens, but that feeling of how your body is responding. If you could consider this question of what it might look like, sound like, feel like, what discomfort would look like in someone else. If you could put in the chat into words what you physically, with your own self, can notice in someone else, that's a huge piece of that social awareness that we're trying to give you practice and time to sit with tonight.
And I'm glad we're doing this practice, because for a lot of us, when we work in social awareness, we may be working in the area of racial and social justice, for instance. And that's a great place that many of us want to have more practice. When we go back up to the example we used of the student coming from a foreign country. That's a great example of where we're using those skills in that social awareness piece. So be very open and broad to how you respond to this, whatever lens you may be wearing tonight.
Love that. And I think it's important to all those nonverbal cues are so key and so important. And also those interactions you have with someone where they just agree with you all of a sudden, they're just like, okay. They're just like, yes, and you know that maybe that's not quite what they're feeling. This is a very it's tricky because you can only be inside yourself. So doing the best that you can to listen and empathize with others outside of yourself, we can hopefully build those social compassionate, empathetic skills that increase our ability to be effective. And I'm noticing lots of eye contact, Aris, and I'm just thinking about
Yeah.
my experience with my Japanese students when I was teaching
Mhm.
in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and how eye contact was very disrespectful for them. It was hard for them to maintain a lot of eye contact because it wasn't something natural to them. So again, that ability to deal with diversity. So here are some skills for addressing tension.
All right. So they may seem obvious or they may seem like a review, but our intention again is to bring it back to our level of awareness as we're talking about discomfort. So again, the more we can be visible, the more we're thinking about ourselves in the process, making it a piece that we're also looking at that accountability. Again, accountability being a very comfortable word that we use, but also keep a cultural lens on that, you know, how we talk about accountability. So that again, is it about the relationship we're looking at, or we're looking for understanding when we talk about accountability? Again, we want to recognize that it takes time. So normalizing this idea of, you know, we need to disagree without, again, making it seem like somebody has to be right, someone has to be wrong. The disagreement is, again, an example of that misunderstanding and our needing to build capacity and do some more learning and understanding. Also, don't downplay a disagreement and make it seem like it was just, you know, nothing. Really lean into that and stay in that discomfort to make sure that everyone walks away at a place in a space where there's some learning and growth that can happen. And then again, if you learn something new, you know, be sure that you're sharing it and that you're using it, building it as a part of who you are and how you operate.
I think a huge thing for me, Aris, when we were talking about this was that like there's not a winner and a loser. It's an open process. Our graphic was a circle for a very explicit reason. There's no start, there's no finish, there's no one over the other. This is like a continuous interlocking process, which is really kind of strong, a strong visual that I've gotten from our work together.
So another strategy we wanted to also just share tonight, for those of you who are familiar with the think aloud model that we tend to use with reading, I've seen in my time as an instructional coach, saw it modeled in math, again, you know, trying to give a better view of like how something works. We want to talk about that we can do this in this work too, but we call it a think and feel aloud. And so once again, if you're familiar with that structure of how we model for students, how we get to an answer or how we denote comprehension or curiosity about text, we can do this with this work as well. So the essence of the strategy is here listed for you. Once again, like anything else, and I believe I saw it in chat a couple times, it's all about the practice, and it's all about taking the time to do this first for self, practice with self, and then have that opportunity to use it when it works. But the most important thing is all learning is emotional. So whether you're using the Think Aloud for content courses, or we're doing it as we're working through a conflict with students or with peers ourselves, this is something we can get really good at. And this is something we can use even with our own families and friends. So we wanted to give you something that, again, you can take and practice and use as you're working through your social awareness.
There's a later slide in the extra resources that is linked on this slide that is a positive action .net resource with some other activities that you can do with others to build social skills. We know your upcoming webinar is on a lot of that content, so we're not going to go over that today, but if you're looking for some more ideas of something you can do tomorrow, right, to help build these social awareness skills, that might be interesting for you to look at. We've come full circle. We've done it. So we've had a very interesting moment together. We've had the chance to think about some of these elements of social awareness. We've looked through the lens of empathy, specifically building empathy, not just cognitive empathy of, oh, it would be awful to be that student, to be laughed at, right? For being myself, all the way to that idea that when we have an actionable understanding where we can have empathy for the students that don't know how to react, when we can build purpose out of tension and discomfort. We just wanted you to take that self-assessment again, briefly. So once again, I'm going to go through, I'm going to read them for you, and just if you have a moment of clarity, or if you've had a shift in your thinking, or if there's a particular strength or challenge that you'd like to share in that chat as we've done this work together tonight, please feel free to do so. The element of empathy. I listen actively and can grasp another person's perspective and feelings from both verbal and nonverbal cues. I believe that in general, people are doing their best, and I expect the best of them. I appreciate and get along with people of diverse backgrounds and cultures in my school community, and utilize inclusionary practices to ensure all voices are represented. I am astute in organizational situations and am able to identify crucial social networks. I understand the organizational forces at work, guiding values and unspoken rules that operate among people. I'm just thinking about sixth grade relationships that I had with students, and it's a lot to think about, let alone my own relationships with other humans in my life that I care for. Again, this tool is available. It's on Castle's website. It's on the slides. You can open it anytime. It has been very valuable for me doing this important work. So before we finish the night,
this is a final graphic that we wanted to just put in the space. First of all, I hope you love the little sparklies. We had a lot of fun enjoying trying to put emphasis here. As you know, as we started, there are several components to social awareness. And our night, we really looked at empathy, but we want to recognize and identify that as you do this self-work and work with others, there are several types of social awareness. And we wanted to give honor to those pieces that we didn't have time for, but recognize that you in particular modeled listening actively by being participants with us tonight, as we spent a lot of time in respect to talking and really exploring this concept of empathy.
and I just have to say that one element in our rubric from up above about, right, like in general, people are doing their best, right? Like we all did our best tonight. I love that, that piece of it. So thank you. Okay. I'm not, Jennifer, am I doing these ones, or Mark?
I can, and then I can pass it over to Mark. So if you want to learn more about NEA's leadership framework, this is your opportunity to go there. And you can also do a self-assessment around the social emotional intelligence competency that was shared at the beginning. So take advantage of that, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, and especially thank you, Aris and Ellen. I mean, I took, I think, 5 pages of notes. So, and I probably, I don't know about our participants, but this session 5 really came at a really important time. I think, many times we just continue to drive and push, worry about making sure everybody else is okay. And we're not putting that oxygen mask on ourselves and taking care of ourselves, particularly at this time of the year when it's getting into April, right? We're clinging on to try to get into a break or to a holiday. And this was good for me just to really reemphasize how, if we're not taking care of ourselves, how can we take care of one another? I'm looking over here at this slide on sympathy and empathy, and I noticed one of the things, this may have come up in the chat, but the sympathy caricature just had no emotion on their face. And while the empathetic had the sad face along with the person who was hurting and was providing that solution. So I just want to say thank you all for being here, taking the time out of your busy schedule, to our facilitators, to our participants, to our amazing NEA staff. And I just am really grateful that we have such expert leaders who are guiding in this work, and our members who care so deeply in making sure that we're taking care of each other as well as our students. So with that, we will close out. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and from NEA's hearts for all that you're doing each and every day for our students, schools, and communities. So until we meet again on our next TQ webinar, you all, thank you so much. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you, presenters. Great job.